Few nameplates in American automotive history have traveled a path as curiously winding as the Dodge Dart. For most enthusiasts, the Dart is remembered as the compact, practical, and affordable workhorse that carried Dodge through the 1960s and into the mid-1970s. A small car with big car attitude and a reputation for reliability. But before it became one of Dodge's best-selling compact models, the Dart began life as something entirely different. A full-size automobile conceived to replace the Coronet in 1960. Over the years, it was reimagined, downsized, and repositioned several times until it finally found its stride as a compact. Along the way, it left behind some of the most interesting and misunderstood machines in Mopar history, none more so than the 1962 Dodge Dart. The early 1960s were a time of uncertainty and experimentation across Detroit. Each of the big three automakers was chasing shifting market trends, trying to anticipate what American drivers wanted next. Compact cars were becoming fashionable. The success of Chevrolet's Corvair and Ford's Falcon showed that smaller, more efficient vehicles could win hearts even in a land of big V8s. Chrysler, whose bread and butter was built on size and power, found itself trying to play catch-up in a rapidly changing landscape. The result was a series of decisions that, in hindsight, seem both fascinating and fateful. When the Dodge Dart arrived in 1960, it was meant to fill the void left by the outgoing Coronet. It was large, powerful, and full of the flashy chrome and sweeping fins that defined the era's styling language. The car's proportions and exuberant details echoed the optimism of the post-war boom. But by 1962, Dodge's direction shifted abruptly. The story goes that someone high up at Chrysler overheard a Chevrolet executive talking about plans for a smaller car. In reality, Chevy was preparing the Chevelle, a mid-size model set for the 1964 model year. Unfortunately, the message was misinterpreted. The decision-makers at Chrysler thought their rival was preparing to shrink its full-size lineup, and so Dodge and Plymouth rushed to do the same. What followed was one of the more infamous mix-ups in American automotive history. The entire line of Dodge and Plymouth full-size cars was downsized ahead of the 1962 model year. The mistake affected a roster of well-known names. Dart, Polara, Savoy, Belvedere, Fury, all were built on smaller wheelbases, with proportions that looked awkward next to the towering, road-filling cars buyers still preferred. The timing was disastrous. Chevrolet and Ford stayed big, while Dodge suddenly looked out of step with the market it had dominated only a few years earlier. Dodge scrambled to introduce the custom 880 to fill the full-size gap, but the damage was already done. The 1962 Dodge Dart that resulted from this corporate confusion was a car without a clear audience. It was smaller than a full-size but not quite a compact, occupying an uneasy middle ground. The styling didn't help its case. Designed by Virgil Exner's team, the car featured bold, angular sheet metal with odd surface sculpting, deeply concave side panels, and pronounced front and rear fenders. Exner's forward-look design philosophy was already fading by the early 60s, and on the Dart it came across as eccentric rather than futuristic. To some, the design appeared confused, part spaceship, part grocery getter. To others, it had a strange charm, an audacious individuality that made it unlike anything else on the road. Despite its polarizing appearance, the Dart was offered in a wide range of body styles and trims. Buyers could choose between sedans, hardtops, convertibles, and station wagons. Under the hood, Dodge offered a broad selection of engines, from the humble 225 cubic inch slant 6, renowned for its smoothness and reliability, to the fire-breathing 413 cubic inch max wedge V8 that turned the Dart into a legitimate dragstrip menace. But those high-performance versions were rare, built in small numbers for racers who knew what they were getting. Most Darts left the factory as sensible family transportation, destined for suburbia rather than the quarter mile. Looking back, the 1962 Dart embodies a fascinating contradiction. It was both a misstep and a milestone. A misstep because its odd proportions and styling alienated traditional buyers, but a milestone because it set the stage for Dodge's future in the compact and mid-size segments. When the Dart was downsized again in 1963 to become a true compact, the nameplate finally found its footing. The smaller Dart became one of Dodge's most successful cars of the decade, a cornerstone of its lineup for over a dozen years. But that brief 1962 model year, the lone year of the in-between Dart, remains a unique and misunderstood chapter in Mopar history. Among the many configurations built that year, one stands out today for its rarity and understated appeal: the 1962 Dodge Dart 440 Station Wagon. The 440 designation denoted trim level, not engine size, a point that often confuses those unfamiliar with early 60s Dodge nomenclature. The 440 sat above the base model, but below the top-tier Polara, offering a touch more comfort and chrome without straying into luxury territory. In station wagon form, it represented the kind of family car that once filled American driveways from coast to coast. A practical hauler with room for six and a tailgate ready for everything from weekend picnics to cross-country road trips. Finding one today, especially in original and unrestored condition, is a rare treat. That's what makes the 1962 Dart 440 wagon, recently spotted at the 2025 Fall Carlisle Collector Car Auction, such a compelling discovery. Sitting quietly amid rows of polished classics, this wagon seemed to tell a different story, one not of perfection, but of survival. Covered in a soft layer of barn dust, with time-worn paint and just a hint of surface rust along the lower panels, it wore its age with quiet dignity. This was not a car that had been pampered under a dust cover or restored to concours condition. It was a survivor, a genuine artifact of the early 1960s American road. The two-tone green paint, faded yet harmonious, hinted at the car's original factory charm. The body appeared to wear light green, while the roof shimmered, or once did, in glacé green poly, Dodge's code GG1. Even dulled by decades of oxidation, the pairing lent the car an authentic period look. The chrome trim, though pitted in places, still caught the light, a reminder of an age when even family wagons were dressed with bright work that reflected pride and craftsmanship. Inside, the story was likely the same simple, purposeful design meant to endure family life. Vinyl bench seats, a large steering wheel, and a dashboard lined with cleanly arranged gauges. The Dart's interior wasn't luxurious, but it was functional and comfortable. Families in 1962 appreciated cars that felt substantial, that could handle long trips without complaint. And while this particular car's odometer reading isn't known, its well-worn surfaces suggest decades of faithful service before it was retired. Under the hood, speculation abounds. The 440 badging doesn't reveal what engine lies beneath, and with a "Do Not Touch" sign on the windshield at the auction, no one was able to confirm. It could be the workhorse 225 cubic inch slant 6, smooth, efficient, and nearly indestructible, or perhaps one of the small block V8 options like the 318, which offered a balanced blend of performance and economy. The big block 361 or 383 V8s were possible, though less common in wagons, and the monstrous 413 Max Wedge would make this a unicorn among survivors. Most likely, it's a modest small block, which fits the car's practical nature. Still, the imagination runs wild. What if this old grocery getter hides a secret beneath its hood? Dodge built around 24,400 Dart wagons for 1962. That might sound like a decent number, but when you consider how few have survived, especially in complete, unrestored condition, the odds of finding one today are surprisingly slim. Many were driven hard, rusted out, or simply discarded as they aged. For decades, the 1962 Dart was a forgotten car, unloved and underappreciated. Only the Max Wedge versions earned a following among collectors, and even those were often stripped for their drivetrains. The rest languished in scrapyards or behind barns, victims of neglect and changing tastes. But times have a way of changing perspective. As the classic car hobby matures, enthusiasts have begun to rediscover the beauty in the obscure and the imperfect. Cars like this 1962 Dart wagon tell stories that restored showpieces cannot. Every scratch and faded panel carries history, proof of a life lived in motion, of roads traveled and families carried. In an era where authenticity and originality are increasingly prized, the humble survivor has gained new respect. This Dart, with its weathered green paint and untouched demeanor, fits that ideal perfectly. At the Fall Carlisle auction, the car was offered for $9,900. Not an extravagant price, but one that acknowledges its rarity and charm. Whether it's sold or not, the mere fact that it appeared there, intact and recognizable, felt like a small victory. Here was a car from one of Dodge's most misunderstood years, still standing tall more than 6 decades later. For those who appreciate the unsung heroes of American motoring, that alone was something to celebrate. The 1962 Dart also serves as a reminder of how unpredictable the automotive industry can be. What was once dismissed as a styling misfire or marketing blunder can, over time, become a cherished relic. Context changes everything. The car that looked awkward in 1962 now looks boldly different in a sea of uniform crossovers. Its eccentric curves and angular stance, once mocked, now seem endearing, a reflection of an era when designers weren't afraid to take risks, when every model had a personality. There's a certain poetry in the survival of a car like this. It represents more than just metal and mechanical parts. It embodies the resilience of an idea. The Dart nameplate endured through corporate upheaval, design experimentation, and market shifts. It shrank, grew, and shrank again, adapting to the times until it finally found a form that resonated with buyers. The compact Dart of the mid-1960s became a staple of Dodge's lineup, beloved by families, commuters, and young drivers alike. Yet the strange, one-year-only 1962 model remains the most intriguing, a snapshot of an industry caught between eras. Looking at the 1962 Dart 440 wagon today, you can almost imagine its life story unfolding. Perhaps it once belonged to a young family in the suburbs, bought new from a local Dodge dealer with pride and excitement. It carried children to school, hauled groceries, and went on summer vacations with luggage piled high. Later, as the years passed and newer cars arrived, it was pushed aside, parked in a barn or garage, quietly aging as the world around it changed. Decades later, when someone brushed away the dust and saw those faded green panels again, they found not just an old car but a piece of living history. For the modern collector, restoring such a vehicle is both a challenge and a calling. Parts are scarce, documentation limited, and the temptation to modify is strong. But the true value of this car lies in its authenticity. Preserving it as a survivor, cleaning, maintaining, and stabilizing rather than over-restoring honors its story. There is beauty in imperfection, especially when those imperfections speak of an honest life well lived. In that sense, the 1962 Dart wagon is not just a relic, it's a time capsule. As the automotive world moves ever faster toward electrification and automation, cars like this remind us why we fell in love with the automobile in the first place. They connect us to a tactile, analog past, a time when driving was an experience, when each engine had a voice and every curve of sheet metal carried intent. Standing in front of that old green Dodge at the auction, you can almost smell the faint scent of aged vinyl and gasoline. Hear the echo of a slant six turning over on a cool morning. Feel the solid thunk of a metal door closing with authority. In a world obsessed with perfection, the 1962 Dodge Dart 440 wagon dares to be imperfect. It is a reminder that history often hides in the most unassuming corners, in barn-fresh survivors, in forgotten nameplates, in cars that never made the cover of glossy magazines. For Mopar enthusiasts, it offers a rare opportunity to see the roots of Dodge's evolution laid bare, unfiltered by nostalgia or marketing spin. It's a car that asks for nothing more than appreciation, and in return, it gives a glimpse into the heart of an era that shaped American motoring. So perhaps it's time to give the 1962 Dart its due. Not as a misfit, but as a milestone. Not as the awkward middle child of the Dodge lineup, but as a bold experiment that paved the way for the compact cars that followed. Its story is a testament to the unpredictable beauty of automotive history, how mistakes can lead to innovation, and how forgotten cars can one day find their audience. Somewhere out there, maybe in a quiet garage or on a rural back road, this faded green wagon is waiting for its next chapter. It doesn't need restoration to shine. It only needs someone who can see it for what it is. A survivor from a bygone age, still proud, still standing, and still carrying the spirit of Dodge into the modern world.